I will establish my forward operating base on what you call the Moon, a fortress from which the great ascension of humanity shall commence. You have 3 days to carefully consider my offer. After that, I will proceed regardless of your ultimate decision. As the towering golden figure began to rise higher into the atmosphere, Thor suddenly whirled Mjolnir and launched himself skyward, determined to stop him. "I cannot possibly allow you to threaten this world," he bellowed, his hammer crackling with lightning as he closed the distance. The Emperor rotated in midair, extending his hand toward the approaching Asgardian, brave but hopelessly outmatched. A concentrated beam of pure golden psychic energy erupted from the Emperor's palm, striking Thor with a force that even his godly constitution could not fully withstand. The Thunder God plummeted back toward the ground, slamming into the earth and leaving a massive crater where he landed. He slowly rose, visibly shaken, Mjolnir trembling in his grip. "He is stronger than anything I have ever faced, perhaps stronger than Odin himself." The Emperor continued his ascent until he was nothing more than a distant point of golden light among the clouds. Then, in a brilliant flash that briefly turned night into day, he vanished, streaking toward Earth's satellite at speeds that utterly defied conventional physics. The collected heroes stood in stunned silence, struggling to process the sheer scale of what had just occurred. It was Spider-Man who finally, nervously broke the tension. "So, did we just meet Space Jesus, or what?" No one laughed. On the stark surface of the Moon, the Emperor stood alone, gazing back at the beautiful blue marble of Earth. So much potential there, he thought. So much squandered on petty conflicts and divided purpose, exactly as it had been on old Terra before he had unified it under his banner and begun the Great Crusade. With a single thought and gesture, he began to fundamentally reshape the lunar surface. The ground shuddered as monumental structures started to rise. Towers of impossible architecture, shimmering walls of pure golden energy, a fortress that would serve as the launching pad for humanity's new empire. As he worked, the Emperor reflected on the beings he had met. Powerful, yes, more capable than he had initially calculated. The sorcerer with his reality-bending artifacts, the artificial being housing a power stone, the woman whose chaotic abilities had actually managed to touch his mind. They would resist. Of course they would, just as many had resisted during the unification wars on old Terra. They were unable to see beyond their limited, short-term perspectives. They couldn't comprehend the brutal necessity of his grand vision. In time, they would either understand or they would be swept aside. The outcome for him was inevitable. Back on Earth, an urgent emergency summit convened at the Avengers facility. Every available hero had been summoned alongside key representatives from Wakanda, S.H.I.E.L.D., and even Asgard. The mood was heavy. The implications of the monarch's arrival weighed heavily on everyone present. Let's begin with a summary of what we know, Fury started, standing at the head of the long conference table. This Emperor appears to be human, or at least humanoid, but possesses power on a scale we have almost never encountered. Dr. Strange, still pale from his recent psychic clash, leaned forward. His energy signature doesn't match anything in the mystic archives. It's not magic as we understand it, though it operates on similar principles. He refers to it as psychic power, but it's vastly beyond any such ability we've ever documented on this planet.
My scans registered immense reality distortion around him, Tony added. It was almost as if he was imposing his own laws of physics on our universe. The energy output was, well, let's just say if we could harness it, we could power the entire planet for a century. Thor, his usual boisterous demeanor completely subdued, spoke next. In Asgard, there are ancient tales of beings called the Celestials, entities of such magnitude they can create or destroy worlds at a whim. His might reminded me of those legends. But he claimed to be human, Steve pointed out. From another reality, yes, but still human. Wanda, having somewhat recovered from the psychic contact, shook her head slowly. Not just human, humanity's future, as he perceives it. I glimpsed fragments of his mind. He genuinely believes himself to be the absolute pinnacle of human evolution, the sole guardian of mankind's ultimate destiny. Vision placed a steady, comforting hand on her shoulder. And he is absolutely convinced that his method, unity achieved through total, absolute control, is the only viable path to survival. Which brings us to the threats he warned about, Fury continued. Strange, you saw something when you used the Time Stone. Care to elaborate? Strange hesitated, his hands shaking slightly. It was incredibly difficult to comprehend. Entities that exist partially outside our dimension, vast swarms that devour all life, ancient machine empires older than human civilization, and 4 primary presences, intelligences that feed on emotion, worship, and suffering. They were distant, unfocused, but the Emperor's arrival seems to have immediately drawn their attention.
So he wasn't lying about the threats, Bruce Banner noted quietly. Not necessarily, Strange conceded. But that doesn't excuse his methods. Replacing one form of domination with another is not salvation. The question remains. T'Challa, the Black Panther and King of Wakanda, spoke for the first time. How do we respond to his ultimatum, 3 days before he proceeds with his plans, with or without our cooperation? We fight, Steve said firmly. We've faced would-be conquerors before. Have we? Tony challenged. This isn't just an alien army or a robot legion. This is a being who stopped Thor with a mere gesture, who shrugged off a direct hit from the Mind Stone, who unraveled one of Strange's most powerful spells like it was a child's toy. Stark is correct, Thor acknowledged grimly. Our usual combat strategies will not prevail against such overwhelming power. The debate raged on.
strategies proposed and quickly dismissed. Throughout the hall, a chilling sense of inevitability hung in the air. This was not an enemy they could defeat using conventional means. As the sun rose on the second day, satellite imagery confirmed their worst fears. A massive structure now dominated the lunar surface, a fortress of gleaming gold and impossible geometry, visible even to the naked eye from Earth. The Emperor watched it all unfold from his lunar stronghold. Their fear, their confusion, their desperate attempts to understand. So predictable, so human. With a thought, he extended his consciousness toward Earth once more, not to all minds this time, but to a carefully selected few, those with the potential to understand, those who might serve as his future generals, his administrators, his own primarchs in this new reality. Tony Stark was in his lab, surrounded by holographic data, when he felt the presence enter his mind. It wasn't an invasive violation, but a gentle door opening, inviting him inward. "Stark," the Emperor's voice resonated directly in his thoughts. "Your intellect is wasted on trinkets and toys. I offer you knowledge beyond your wildest imagination. Technology that would make your most advanced creations seem like stone tools. Join me. Help forge humanity's ultimate future among the stars." Across the world, others received similar, perfectly tailored offers. T'Challa was shown visions of Wakanda expanding across continents, its technology the undisputed foundation for a magnificent human empire. Bruce Banner was promised mastery over his alternate persona, an end to the constant, exhausting internal struggle. Wanda Maximoff was offered absolute control over her chaotic powers, a complete understanding that would transform her from a dangerous wildcard into a controlled weapon of immense focused potential. Even Steve Rogers, the very embodiment of resistance to tyranny, was not exempt. The Emperor showed him a world perfectly united, perpetually at peace, humanity spreading throughout the galaxy without the constant warfare and division that had always defined humanity's history. "Consider carefully," the Emperor's voice echoed in each mind. "What I offer is not simple domination, but true transcendence. Not subjugation, but absolute salvation. The path is undeniably difficult. Sacrifices must be made. But the alternative is total extinction." The psychic projections ended as suddenly as they began, leaving each recipient profoundly shaken and uncertain. The offers had been tailored with terrifying precision to match each individual's deepest desires, greatest fears, and most noble aspirations.
At the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange sat cross-legged, the eye of Agamotto open before him, searching through countless millions of possible futures. In every single one, he saw variations of the same outcome, the Emperor's vision fulfilled, humanity unified under his banner, expanding into the cosmos. Yet in every scenario, something vital was lost, the unique, chaotic spark that fueled human innovation, the freedom that the Emperor claimed to be sacrificing for their survival.
And beneath those futures, Strange glimpsed something else, a shadow rapidly growing. Vast, malevolent entities stirring in the void between dimensions, drawn by the Emperor's overwhelming psychic footprint. The threats he had warned of were real, but his very presence in this reality was accelerating their approach. Strange's eyes snapped open, the time stone closing with a flash of emerald light. "Wong!" he yelled, rising swiftly. "Prepare the mirror dimension chamber and contact everyone. We have far less time than we thought." On the lunar surface, the Emperor stood in the heart of his fortress. He sensed the approach of a vessel before his augmented eyes could even detect it. A ship of Asgardian design, utilizing technology mimicking the Bifrost. He allowed it to land. From the vessel emerged 3 figures. Thor, his body protected from the vacuum by his innate godly powers. Tony Stark, encased in specialized space armor. And Dr. Strange, supporting himself with a platform of mystic energy. They approached the massive gateway which solidified and silently parted, opening into a vast inner hall that miraculously contained air and normal Earth gravity. The Emperor sat upon a simple throne, watching their approach. "You are earlier than expected," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Have you come to accept my offer, or to make futile objections?" Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir held respectfully at his side. "We came to speak plainly, Emperor of mankind. You claim to protect humanity, yet you would strip them of that which makes them truly human. And what would that be, Asgardian?" the Emperor asked. "Choice," Strange replied before Thor could speak. "The right to determine their own destiny, even if that destiny leads to failure." "Choice is a luxury afforded only to species that are not relentlessly hunted across the cosmos," the Emperor countered. "In my reality, humanity learned this lesson through near extinction. Would you have your people learn the same brutal way?" Tony stepped forward, retracting his helmet. "We've faced extinction-level threats before. We're still here, not because someone imposed their will from above, but because we chose to stand together when it mattered most." "Admirable sentiments," the Emperor acknowledged, "but ultimately naive. The threats you have faced are insignificant compared to what is coming." Strange raised his hands, orange sigils forming between his fingers. "About that, I've been looking ahead, Emperor, using the Time Stone to peer into possible futures, and I've noticed something interesting." The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, the first genuine sign of concern he had shown. "The stones of this reality are powerful artifacts, but limited. They cannot fully comprehend the scope of what approaches." "Maybe not," Strange agreed. "But they showed me enough to know that your presence here isn't just warning us of these threats, it is accelerating their arrival. Your vast psychic footprint spans dimensions, leaving a trail for them to follow." For the first time, the Emperor genuinely hesitated before responding. "An unforeseen complication. The barriers between realities are different here, more permeable to certain energies." "In other words," Tony translated, "your arrival punched a hole in the cosmic fabric, and now the big bads you were warning us about are using it like a highway." The Emperor rose from his throne, towering even over Thor. All the more reason to prepare, to unify your world's defenses under a single banner, under my guidance. Or, Strange countered, all the more reason for you to return to your own reality before the damage becomes utterly irreparable. The Emperor's expression hardened. I cannot return. The passage was one way, a desperate measure taken when my own universe faced collapse. I am here now, and I will not stand idle while humanity faces annihilation.
Thor stepped closer, his voice lowered.
There is another possibility, Emperor, one we propose in good faith. The Emperor regarded the Asgardian with mild curiosity. Speak, then.
Work with us, not above us, Thor proposed.
Share your knowledge, your power, but allow humanity to maintain its sovereignty. Be an ally, not a ruler. The Emperor's laugh was unexpected, a sound that carried the crushing weight of millennia of bitter experience. I tried that approach once, in the early days of Old Terra. I guided from the shadows, inspired great leaders, planted seeds of advanced knowledge when humanity was ready. Do you know what happened, Asgardian? Thor remained silent, sensing the answer would be grim. They fell to fighting among themselves, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. Technology meant to elevate was instantly weaponized. Discoveries meant to unite were hoarded. The age of strife nearly ended humanity before the true threats from beyond could even reach them. With respect, Strange interjected, this isn't your Earth. Our history is different. Our potential is different. Your history, the Emperor said, follows the same disastrous patterns. Different names, different dates, but the same fundamental flaw. Humanity divided against itself, while vastly greater predators circle. As they debated, the atmosphere in the chamber subtly changed. The air thickened, colors became subtly wrong, and sounds echoed strangely. The Emperor sensed it first, his head snapping up, his eyes focused on something beyond the physical realm. They come, he stated simply, all pretense of negotiation instantly vanishing from his voice. Sooner than I calculated. The dimensional barriers are failing. Strange felt it a moment later. Something's breaking through, not just in one place, everywhere. The Emperor moved with shocking speed, striding past the three heroes toward the fortress entrance. Witness, he commanded, what I sought to protect you from. Outside, the stark lunar landscape had been transformed. The black sky now rippled with colors that had no names in human language. The distant stars seemed to blink in patterns that suggested malevolent intelligence. And far away, where Earth hung in the void, shadows moved across its surface that were not cast by any physical object. The veil thins, the Emperor explained, his voice grim. The entities I warned of begin to press against reality, sensing weakness, sensing opportunity. Strange's hands moved in complex patterns, attempting to reinforce the dimensional barriers with golden energy. This is happening too quickly, he muttered. Our calculation suggested we had more time. Your calculations failed to account for variables beyond your limited comprehension, the Emperor stated. Now we must act decisively,
or watch as your reality completely unravels." The Emperor raised his hands, golden light erupting from his palms to join Strange's efforts. The combined energy spread across the visible sky like a luminous net, temporarily stabilizing the dimensional boundaries. But even as they worked, new ruptures formed faster than they could be sealed. "It is as I feared. The incursion has progressed too far for conventional countermeasures. More direct intervention is now required." Without warning, he placed his massive hand on Stranger's shoulder. The sorcerer gasped as unimaginable power surged into him, the eye of Agamotto flaring wildly as it channeled energies it was never designed to contain. "What are you doing?" Strange demanded, straining to control the influx of power. "Providing you with the temporary means to strengthen this reality's natural barriers," the Emperor explained. "Your artifact, combined with my psychic might, creates a unique resonance that temporarily repels the entities attempting to break through, but it is not a permanent solution." Thor and Tony watched in stunned amazement as the sky stabilized, the unnatural colors receding. Strange staggered but remained upright, the flow of power reduced to manageable levels. "What you witnessed was merely the first wave," the Emperor said, removing his hand. "The harbingers of what approaches. The true threat remains beyond the veil, relentlessly gathering strength for a full-scale incursion." Thor's expression darkened. "Then we must prepare. Asgard will stand with Midgard against this threat." "Noble, but insufficient," the Emperor dismissed. "Your Asgard is powerful by this universe's standards, but pales in comparison to what is coming. Only humanity, completely united and elevated beyond its current limitations, stands any chance of survival." Tony, who had been uncharacteristically silent, his mind processing every variable, finally spoke. "What if there's a third option? Not your way, not our way, but something entirely new?" The Emperor regarded him with mild interest. "Explain." "You say you can't go back to your reality. Fine. But what if we could send them back to where they came from, close the breach from this side?" "Impossible with your current technology and understanding."
The Emperor dismissed.
"Our current technology? Sure," Tony conceded. "But what about yours? Combined with the Infinity Stones? Combined with Asgardian science? Combined with Strange's magic? Combined with every resource we can muster?"
For the first time, the Emperor appeared to truly consider an alternative to his original rigid plan. "Such an effort would require absolute coordination, unquestioning obedience to a unified strategy, and resources far beyond what your fractured nations would willingly provide." "Then earn their trust," Thor suggested. "Demonstrate your value as a crucial ally, rather than imposing your will as a conqueror." The Emperor's expression suggested he found the idea naive, but he did not immediately reject it. "You propose that I assist in defending this reality from the threats I inadvertently drew to it? Then simply, what? Live among you as an advisor? A weapon to be deployed at need?" "Why not?" Strange asked, having fully recovered. You claim to value humanity above all else. Prove it by respecting their right to choose their own path, even if you believe that path is flawed." The Emperor stood in silence for a long moment, his ancient mind weighing ideals against practicalities. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weighty finality. "I will consider your proposal, but not from a position of weakness. I will continue the construction of this fortress. I will continue preparations for humanity's eventual elevation. And when the full incursion begins, we shall see whose approach proves the more effective." It was not the answer they had hoped for, but it was not an outright rejection either. "Now leave," the Emperor commanded. "Return to your Earth. Make whatever preparations you deem necessary. We will speak again when circumstances demand it." As they turned to depart, the Emperor added one final chilling statement. "Know this, I have witnessed the fall of countless civilizations across 10,000 years of war. I have seen species with potential far greater than humanity's reduced to extinction because they clung to comfortable ideals rather than embracing necessary truths. I will not allow that fate to befall mankind in this reality or any other. One way or another, humanity will survive, even if I must break it to save it." The journey back to Earth was undertaken in contemplative silence. Upon their return, an emergency council convened. The mood was grim as Tzeentch, Thor, and Tony recounted their meeting and the terrifying glimpse they had received of the threats the Emperor had warned about. "So, we're caught between a rock and a hard place," Sam Wilson, the Falcon, summarized. "Either accept this Emperor's total guidance or face extra-dimensional horrors that make a cosmic tyrant look like a playground bully." "Those aren't our only options," Steve insisted. "If these threats are real, we face them together, on our terms. We've done it before." "Not like this," Tzeentch countered. "What I glimpsed defies description. Entities that feed on emotion itself. Swarms that devour not just life, but reality. Machine empires that view organic existence as a mathematical error to be corrected. And something worse, a corrupting force that turns strength against itself, that makes virtue into vice." Wanda, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke. "I saw them too when I touched his mind. He calls them the ruinous powers, gods formed from the collective psychic imprint of all sentient species, entities that represent the darkest aspects of consciousness. But I also saw something else, a profound contradiction at the heart of his plan. He claims to fight for humanity's ultimate survival, yet his method strips away everything that makes humanity worth saving. In his reality, mankind survives as a vast, oppressive empire built on ignorance and endless sacrifice. Trillions living and dying in service to a doctrine they don't even truly understand." "Better than extinction," Natasha Romanoff noted pragmatically. "Is it?" Steve challenged. "What's the point of survival if we lose our souls in the process?"
The debate was violently interrupted by a blaring alarm. Screens activated automatically, showing news feeds from across the globe. Unexplained, strange disturbances were being reported globally. Shadows that moved against the light, disembodied voices heard in empty rooms, technology malfunctioning in patterns that suggested a controlled, malevolent intelligence. And above it all, aurora-like lights in the sky, visible even in daylight, rippling with colors that caused physical discomfort to those who gazed upon them too long. "It's starting," Tzeentch said grimly, "faster than I anticipated. The dimensional barriers continue to weaken." "Can you stop it?" Fury demanded. Tzeentch shook his head. "Not alone, not permanently. What the Emperor and I did on the moon was a temporary measure, and it required his raw power combined with the Time Stone." "Then we need him," Bruce Banner stated simply. "Whether we like his methods or not, we need his knowledge and his power." "At what cost?" Steve argued. "If we surrender our autonomy now, we'll never get it back." As they debated, Tony Stark stood slightly apart, his genius mind racing through countless possibilities. Finally, he rejoined the group, his expression alight with grim determination. "I might have a solution. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but a third option." All eyes turned to him as he activated a holographic display showing complex schematics that combined elements of Earth technology, Asgardian science, and theoretical models based on what they had observed of the Emperor's capabilities. "We build our own dimensional barrier, a shield not just around Earth, but around our entire reality, using the Infinity Stones as power sources, amplified by technology derived from studying the Emperor's fortress." "That's ambitious," Bruce commented, studying the schematics with scientific interest. "Impossible, you mean?" Natasha corrected.
With our current technology, yes, Tony agreed. But we're not limited to what we currently have. Thor can bring Asgardian scientists. T'Challa can contribute Wakandan resources. Strange has the mystic community. And I've got, well, me and the Emperor. Fury asked the question on everyone's mind. How do we get him on board? Tony's expression hardened with determination. We offer him a choice. Either help us as an ally, sharing his knowledge while respecting our autonomy, or watch as we potentially destroy ourselves attempting to solve the problem our way. He will not respond well to ultimatums, Thor warned. It's not an ultimatum, Tony countered. It's an opportunity for him to prove that he truly values humanity's survival above his own rigid vision of how that survival should be achieved. The plan was far from perfect. The technological hurdles alone were daunting, to say nothing of the immense coordination required between nations, organizations, and individuals who had rarely worked together effectively. But it was a plan that maintained humanity's agency, that rejected both unconditional surrender to the Emperor and passive acceptance of the approaching threats. Work began immediately. The Avengers facility became the central hub of the most ambitious scientific and mystical collaboration in Earth's history. Scientists from around the world worked alongside sorcerers from Kamar-Taj. Wakandan engineers shared technology they had previously kept hidden for centuries. Asgardian specialists arrived, bringing knowledge that blended advanced science with what humans considered magic. At the center stood Tony Stark, coordinating efforts that spanned disciplines most people didn't know existed, integrating systems that operated on fundamentally different principles. Bruce Banner worked tirelessly at his side, his expertise proving essential to harnessing the required energy. Jane Foster provided crucial insights into the dimensional technology that would form the barrier's foundation, and Stephen Strange supervised the mystical elements. Days passed. The strange phenomena increased in frequency and intensity.
The skies darkened with clouds that formed patterns resembling faces or symbols. On the moon, the Emperor watched. His fortress had grown, but occasional pulses of energy emanated from the structure, temporarily stabilizing the worst dimensional breaches. He was keeping his word, preventing immediate catastrophe, but doing nothing to address the underlying problem. On the 5th day, as the global situation deteriorated further, a delegation was dispatched to the lunar fortress. Steve Rogers, Earth's strategist, Tony Stark, its inventor, and Stephen Strange, its mystic defender. They were admitted into the Emperor's throne room immediately. He sat waiting for them, his expression unreadable. "You returned sooner than expected. Has your resolve already faltered?" Steve stepped forward. "We're not here to surrender, Emperor. We're here to offer a partnership." The Emperor's eyebrow raised fractionally. "Explain." Tony activated a portable holographic projector, displaying the schematics of their barrier project. "We're building this, a shield to repair the dimensional breaches and prevent further incursions, but we need your knowledge to complete it." The Emperor studied the display with interest that slowly transformed into something resembling respect. "Ambitious. The theoretical framework is sound, though your implementation remains crude. You lack understanding of certain fundamental principles." "That's why we're here," Strange said, "to propose an exchange. Your knowledge for our independence. Help us complete this barrier. Teach us what we need to know to defend ourselves, and we'll withdraw our opposition to your presence in our system."
A compromise, the Emperor mused. Rare in my experience for it to be offered rather than forced. He rose from his throne. "Your design has merit, but critical flaws. The power requirements alone would exceed anything your civilization could generate." "That's where the Infinity Stones come in. 6 fundamental forces of our universe harnessed together." The Emperor's interest visibly intensified. "Show me these stones." Strange hesitated, then opened the Eye of Agamotto, revealing the Time Stone within. "This is one of them. The others are scattered, protected. Together they grant power over the fundamental aspects of existence: time, space, reality, mind, soul, power." The Emperor studied the stone with respect. "In my reality, such artifacts were mere legends. Perhaps here they are real. Fascinating." He turned back to the schematics. "With these stones as power sources, your barrier becomes theoretically viable, but the engineering challenges remain immense. The coordination requirements alone would exceed your current capabilities." "That's where you come in," Steve said. "Your knowledge, your experience, not as our ruler, but as our ally." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, calculating. "And if I refuse? If I maintain that only through unity under my direct guidance can humanity survive?" "Then we'd do this without you," Tony stated firmly. "Maybe we succeed, maybe we fail, but it will be our choice." Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, the Emperor laughed, a sound of genuine amusement, though tinged with weariness. "In all my millennia, the stubbornness of humanity never ceases to surprise me. Even in the face of extinction, you cling to your independence with admirable tenacity." He gestured, and the holographic display instantly expanded, sections rewriting themselves as his vast knowledge interfaced with the technology.
Your design requires these modifications. The power distribution must follow this pattern to prevent cascade failures. The dimensional anchors must be placed precisely at these coordinates to maximize stability. The three heroes exchanged glances of cautious optimism. "Understand this," he said as he worked. "What you propose is not merely difficult, it is unprecedented. Even in my reality, such a barrier would be considered theoretically impossible. You attempt what gods would hesitate to undertake." "We've beaten the odds before," Steve said simply. The Emperor paused. "Yes, this reality's humanity possesses a remarkable capacity for defying probability. Perhaps—" he hesitated, as if the thought was difficult to articulate. "Perhaps that is why I was drawn here, not merely by random chance, but by some deeper resonance, a recognition that here, humanity's potential follows a different path than in my reality."
It was the first suggestion that the Emperor might be reconsidering his fundamental assumptions. "I will assist with your barrier," he declared finally. "I will provide the knowledge you require. But know this, if your approach fails, if the incursion cannot be halted by your methods, I will implement mine. Humanity's survival remains non-negotiable." It was not unconditional support, but it was more than they had dared hope for. The bargain was struck. The Emperor would share his knowledge, providing guidance from the moon, rather than establishing direct rule over Earth.
Work on the barrier accelerated with the Emperor's input. Technical challenges were resolved through applications of principles humanity had not yet discovered. The collection of the Infinity Stones became the highest priority, with teams dispatched across Earth and beyond to secure them, eventually locating all 6. As the stones were gathered, the dimensional incursions intensified. Cities reported phenomena that defied explanation. Panic spread, and through it all, the image of the Emperor's lunar fortress remained visible in the sky. The final component of the barrier was constructed in orbit, a massive array of satellites and space stations. The 6 Infinity Stones were placed in specially designed receptacles at facilities around the world, prepared to channel their tremendous power. In orbit, Tony Stark supervised the space-based components. Below, Bruce Banner coordinated the ground facilities. Stephen Strange oversaw the mystical elements. The Emperor watched from his lunar fortress, his psychic senses observing every aspect. As the moment of activation approached, Strange contacted the Emperor. "The barrier will seal all dimensional breaches, including the one that brought you here. Once activated, no further travel between realities will be possible." "I am aware," the Emperor replied. "It is a necessary parameter for complete dimensional integrity. It also means you will be permanently stranded here, Sorcerer. My reality faces its own ending. That is why I came here, to ensure that at least one version of humanity survives the coming darkness." The countdown began. The Infinity Stones pulsed. Alarms blared. The dimensional breaches were expanding exponentially. Creatures of nightmare materialized. The incursion had begun in earnest. "Now or never," Tony's voice came through the comms. "Initiating final sequence." The Infinity Stones flared simultaneously,
their energies shooting skyward to form a web that quickly expanded to encompass the planet. But it wasn't enough. The incursions were too numerous. The barrier formed, then wildly fluctuated. "We're losing coherence in sectors 3 and 5, Bruce reported. "The power distribution is becoming unstable." "The dimensional anchors aren't holding," Tzeentch added. "Something is actively counteracting our efforts." On the moon, the Emperor observed the failing barrier with grim vindication. Humanity's attempt was valiant, but insufficient. Without warning, his fortress blazed with golden light, energy pouring from its spires in a beam directed at Earth, instantly interfacing with the barrier and reinforcing it. "The Emperor!" Tzeentch gasped. "He's channeling his power into the barrier!" The barrier strengthened, but the combined might still struggled. The dimensional tears slowed their closure, but did not stop completely. The powerful, malevolent forces continued to push. The Emperor recognized what was happening. There was only one solution. One final, total sacrifice. Without hesitation, the Emperor redirected his vast psychic power, actively interfacing with the barrier, his consciousness expanding, merging with the energy field, becoming one with the very fabric of the dimensional shield. On Earth, the effects were immediately apparent. The barrier stabilized completely, the tears in reality closing one by one. The nightmare entities were forced back, howling in frustration. But the cost was visible to all. The Emperor's fortress on the moon began to dissolve, its impossible architecture breaking down. The golden giant himself was no longer visible within the structure. His physical form apparently surrendered to become part of the shield itself. "He's becoming the barrier," Tzeentch gasped, "using himself as the final keystone. He's essentially transforming himself into a living dimensional wall." "The barrier is stabilizing across all sectors," Tony reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Dimensional integrity is restoring to normal parameters. Whatever he's doing, it's working." The skies cleared. The unnatural phenomena ceased. Reality reasserted itself as the barrier completed its formation, sealing the solar system within a protective shell. The immediate crisis had passed, secured by the Emperor's consciousness.
In the days that followed, the barrier was studied. The Emperor had not been destroyed. His consciousness had spread throughout the shield, becoming its guiding intelligence. He existed now as an omnipresent guardian, aware of every attempt to breach dimensional integrity, actively maintaining the shield that protected humanity from the horrors beyond. He had become exactly what he had claimed to be, humanity's protector and shepherd, but maintaining a silent vigil that preserved the very freedom he had once sought to restrict. A week later, a psychic message reached the Avengers simultaneously. The Emperor's voice, recognizable yet transformed, resonated in their minds. "I have found my purpose in this reality," he communicated. "Not as humanity's ruler, but as its guardian. The barrier requires constant maintenance, constant vigilance. This task I accept freely." "Can you return to physical form?" Tzeentch asked. "Not without compromising the barrier's integrity," the Emperor replied. "This is not a temporary measure, but a permanent vigil. The forces that seek entrance do not tire.
neither shall I. So you've trapped yourself, become a living shield instead of a living god. An ironic outcome, the Emperor acknowledged. In my reality, I sat upon the golden throne, physically immobile, yet psychically active. Here, I have no throne, no physical form at all, yet my purpose remains fundamentally the same. Does this mean you approve of our stubborn independence after all? Steve asked. The Emperor's response carried a trace of what might almost be called humor. Approve would be an overstatement, Captain Rogers. Let us say I have revised my assessment. Your reality's humanity possesses qualities mine had lost long before my emergence. A capacity for unity without uniformity, for cooperation without submission. These are strengths I had forgotten could exist.
And the threats you warned about? Thor questioned. They remain beyond the barrier. They circle like predators, testing for weakness, the Emperor confirmed. They will never cease their attempts to break through, but neither will I cease my vigilance. This is the purpose I have chosen, the duty I have assumed. The Emperor of mankind, a being who had sought to impose his vision of unity through strength, had instead found a different path. Not a throne from which to command, but a barrier through which to protect. Not subjects to rule, but a species to guard. 1 year to the day after the barrier's creation, Dr. Strange stood on the roof of the Sanctum Sanctorum. To his mystic senses, the Emperor's presence was visible as a subtle golden aura that encompassed the entire solar system. "Are we worth it?" Strange asked softly. "The sacrifice you've made? The eternal vigil you now maintain? Is humanity truly worth such a price?" The response came not as words, but impressions. Immense pride in what humanity had achieved, hope for what it might become, and a certainty that had survived millennia of war. "I have found my purpose," the being who now existed beyond conventional understanding communicated. "Not as humanity's master, but as its shield. This is not sacrifice, but fulfillment." The Emperor of mankind had indeed come to this reality, and in doing so, he had not conquered it. He had become its silent, dedicated guardian.